Good evening, all of you. Myself, Nikita Pandit, and I welcome you to International Author Workshop. I'm the technical host for you for today's session, and I invite Dr. Hannah Ranji ma'am for moderating the session. Thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for deciding to spend this Saturday afternoon here with us. We have a very educative and interesting program ahead, and I'm sure that you will enjoy the session. I welcome Dr. S.S. Jha, President IESRF, the speakers, panelists, and all the participants. Without further ado, let us start by lighting the lamp.
Nikita ma'am, can you please share the video?
असतो मा सद्गमय तमसो मा ज्योतिर्गमय मृत्योर्मा अमृतं गमय सर्वेषां स्वस्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां शान्तिर्भवतु सर्वेषां पूर्णं भवतु सर्वेषां मङ्गलं भवतु लोकाः समस्ताः सुखिनो भवन्तु।
Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much for lighting the digital lamp in keeping with the times. Now we're all here because IESRF has organized this wonderful webinar where each of us are able to join from the comfort of our own home or our own workplace. And to tell us more about IESRF, I request Nikita ji to play the introductory video to inform us about some of the activities of IESRF. Thank you so much, madam, for sharing that with us. So now we come to the main part of the program, and it's indeed an honor for me to be able to introduce our first speaker for this evening, Dr. Rajiv Manas. Thank you so much for taking time, sir, to come and join us and share from your vast knowledge.
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr. Rajiv Manas is the head of the University Library System of Baba Farid University of Health Sciences. Sir comes today with a vast experience of more than 25 years. He completed his PhD and has done online courses and various certificate courses from USA, Australia, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. He has more than 100 research publications in indexed journals, which are both international and national. He has got funding from various reputed institutions, and he is a much sought after guide for PhD candidates. Sir has won many awards. If I started to list them all, we'll be here all night. And he has been an invited speaker in many international and national conferences. He is a member of many prestigious institutions and has organized some of the best conferences in his field. He's the founder president of various social service institutions also, and has a very compassionate and caring outlook. We're very fortunate to have you here with us, sir, and we look forward to learning from your vast experience. Over to you, Dr. Rajiv Manas.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. First of all, good evening to the elite fraternity of the researchers, reviewers, editors, and journals, and publishers of the journals participating in this international event. It is indeed a happy moment for me that I have been provided this wonderful opportunity and have given the responsibility to share my viewpoint, our perspective about what authors want from editors and the reviewer boards of the journals. Though you may have more knowledge about this subject on the board, that it is very important to know what author's perspective about the editorial and the review process. As far as I concerned as an author, I just want my manuscript be accepted. If all of you agree with me, then just go to the chat box and write yes. So indeed, people really want, yeah, I'm getting that. It's really wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So many yes I'm getting. So with the permission of the chair, Dr. Chandra Herath and Dr. Fajat, let me start the discussion on the topic. So I am just sharing my screen now. Yeah. Dr. Ranji, is it a visual?
Yes, sir, it is
Okay,
visible.
okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, yeah, why our manuscript be accepted for publication? It is important question. I would like to start the discussion with the question on the board that why we want our paper be accepted for publication. Whether we have some valid reasons for the same, or are we getting something from this? So my perspective as an author is this may be yours too, for or globally, the authors may have the same kind of perspective. So dear friends, publishing is the key step for a scientific research process. It is necessary to achieve the advancement in the knowledge and to establish understanding in a certain scientific field. We want our knowledge be shared with the people with our colleagues, with the community. We want to influence others. Competition is also there, and to educate people, to entertain, and as well as for the career advancement. So what is the global publication trend? The data predicts that we are in the category of the countries leading globally in the scientific publications. National Science Foundation published these statistics during 2018, and these trends are very promising and raising at least my expectations that India be on the top of the list, or maybe on the top, as no latest data I actually found to support it. So China, for the time, China is there on the top with 20.67%. We are on the third position right now, as per the data. So moving ahead on this direction, let we have little discussion about editorial process. These are what I'm looking at, this picture, what I can assume that people are come to killing our process, our efforts when we are going to publish our manuscript. So editorial process, this is the simplest flow of the editorial process. First, rejection after submission if not in scope of the journal. If yes, then the review process started. After the review, rejection or revision, and the final acceptance. This process carries the time lags. As an author, I know and wants my submission be peer reviewed to fulfill the minimum criteria to get scores as per standards of national agencies for career advancement, etc. So peer review is an evaluation process, as we know, in which experts critiques the work of individuals or groups seeking recognition, publication, or funding. For the publisher, but means they rely on the effective peer review system to uphold not only the quality and validity of individual, but also the overall integrity of the journals they publish. Objectives behind the review process, it acts as a filter and ensures the research is properly verified before being published. It also helps to improve the quality of the research. Then further aims, it is essential part of the publishing process, identifying the strength and weakness of the ideas, and it validates and confirm a researcher's work it make recommendations for improvement. Then how big is the challenge in front of us? From the above flow of editorial process, when there is acceptance, then it is very cheering moment for an author. And on the other side, it is very really disheartening when your paper gets rejected by a journal. Author works very hard to conduct research. They present their work in the form of platform presentation in a conference and or as a research article for publication. When their platform presentations get applauded by the audience, researchers feel encouraged to publish it. However, it may not be appreciated by the editors and reviewers when the research is submitted to a journal for publication. One should not get disappointed by rejections, as most of the top journals have almost 80% rejection rates. Now, here is a key point of discussion that naturally came in context. What we want from the editorial and the review process for acceptance of our manuscript for publication. There may be number of reasons a manuscript be rejected under editorial review process. The paper and the subject may be out of scope and not suitable for the journal and the readership. Weakness of hypotheses are there, too much research, poor methodology, small sample size, poor statistical information, discrepancy of authors and institutes, conflict of interest, which is not declared, ethical committee permissions not taken, informed consent or subjects may not be taken, single case study not having useful points. The target journal may have similar research papers published or already in the process of getting published or suspected or confirmed plagiarism. So in addition to these kind of reasons, there may be 100 more reasons for rejection of manuscript. As indicated by a study, the most common were problematic research design with 33%, text duplication 29%, lack of contribution to knowledge 24%, not suitable to be sent out for review 10%, scholarly self-reflection 3%, ignoring key developments 2%. So a gap, other part of the coin is a gap in its plot leaves important question unanswered. But I observed as an author, there is a significant gap which needs to be addressed or bridged in between the editorial review process and the authors. So what will be the predictable future if this situation may go like this? There will be very discouraging results, as there may be less creativity and research productivity, and there may be gap for more widen with more increase in rejection rates. Ultimately, it will harm the interest of the artists, creators, contributors, researchers, thus not in favor of national interest in encouraging the creativity and creative production. So what we want Now it is the time to discuss the most important part of the discussion, that is what as an author, we want from the editorial review process. As we know, academic publishing is a collaborative process from the colleagues who agrees to look over the first draft of an article to the journal for commissioning, who is the first point of contact, that is editor or the commissioning editor, to the peer reviewers who work with the refinement of the research, to the production and the marketing team who make sure that the final published output both looks good and ideally is widely accepted or read by the people or the community. Like all successful collaborations, the one between an author and a publisher, or really between an author and a publishing team, requires engagement, commitment, and understanding from both sides. Author and publisher, after all, share a common goal, that is to publish the best possible research in the most effective way. There may be gap in between, and the author wants that editorial and review process. Board must understand their point of view to bridge the gap, if any, from submission to acceptance. So the goal, opportunity, the main aims of the presentation to generate intention on some of the major issues created by the digital era. So number one, the way one is responsiveness of the editorial and reviewer board. Responsiveness is the key in the editorial review process. No author has ever wanted to wait several weeks for an acknowledgement of the submission of their work. So he or we want the quick responses in efficient manner, and reassuring too that our efforts we recognized or accepted well in time. So personalized, though that to depersonalize the publishing process, and though we want the automated system of online submission, but sometimes it depersonalize the publishing process and loosen the relationship between authors and the publishers. So finally, as an author, it becomes much easier to think of publishing as a service rather than as a collaboration. So personalized responsiveness makes an author feel valued. Other important point is desktop rejection time. From the initial submission to the first editorial decision about the manuscript, whether sent for review, rejection, or resubmit, immediate response time from the publisher, from the editor, or the reviewer is very important for authors. It encourages them to believe the journal transparency and credibility. Another point, once the manuscript sent for review, the time matters for author, because if too long, then authors have to wait patiently, with which demoralize them, and the next time they will think twice to submit manuscript to the particular journals. However, it is of course not ideal if peer review is delayed by 6 weeks, but it only becomes a serious problem if there is no communication about what is going on and what is happening with their subscription, with their manuscripts. The second point, which is also very important, guaranteeing quality. So qualitative review is very important in this process. Scholarly publishing is still by large characterized by rigorous peer review. It is certainly not unchallenged. A growing number of scholars argue that widespread support for peer review by academic institutions and individual only occurs because not another alternative model has been developed and adopted on a large scale. But for a better or worse, it is viewed as the gold standard. On a very particular level, authors value time peer review perhaps above anything else. So authors expect qualitative review, which should improve their quality of work. As an author, we will be happy to receive good review comments, which are objective, systematic, and scientific. Most of the time during single blind review, author's identity sometimes will be exposed to reviewer. So authors want that unbiased reviews must be received from the reviewers, and bias based on factors such as gender, nationality, region, language, and affiliation with less prestigious institutions must be avoided. Other point, an author might choose a journal because they are responsive and will guide them through submission and peer review process. But any good impression gained here can be completely undermined by poor production. So it is very important that quality of production must be there, while wherever the production of high standards are our expectations from editorial or reviewer board. Then the next point is, if number of reviewers in a particular journal having number of reviewers, the author will have tough time to address all reviewers' comments in a short period of time. So journals, the editorial board, the editor of the journal should minimize at least the reviewers, 2 or 3 reviewers be selected for that particular manuscript, so that less time be taken by the this review process. So the fourth point is, as an author, I want people should read my work, and it is my expectations from the journal and its production team that my manuscript be cited maximally. So another point is responsibilities of the editors and the reviewers. Editors of scientific journals have role and responsibilities toward the authors who provides the content of the journals, which are also very important to bridge the gap between the both. So what more we want from editorial and review board, that is advice, support, guidance, and help to getting our manuscript published. Are they really providing us, or will they provide us? And are we following the ethics as publisher, as author? That this is the next topic to be discussed by Dr. Akanksha Juneja. So the responsibilities of editors, what kind of role we expect from editors are providing guidelines to authors for preparing and submitting manuscripts, providing a clear statement of journals policies on authorship, establishing and defining policies on conflicts of interest, treating all authors with fairness and courtesy, objectivity, with honesty and transparency, so that the confidentiality of every author's works be maintained. Establishing a system for effective and rapid peer review system, making editorial decision reasonable speed and communicating in a clear manner, being vigilant in avoiding the possibility of editors or the referees delaying a manuscript, establishing clear guidelines for authors regarding acceptable practices, and establishing procedures for reconsidering editorial decisions, informing authors for solicited manuscripts that the submission will be evaluated according to the journal standards, developing mechanism in cooperation with publisher to ensure timely publication for accepted manuscripts, clear communication with the author, with all the editorial policies and standards. So my concluding remarks on the topic is that there may be, however, some things that editorial and reviewer boards of journals should aim to offer is efficiency, clear communication, well-managed peer review, guidance and support. And as author, what we can reciprocate by meeting their submission deadlines, responding quickly and efficiently to editorial and review queries, turning their proofs around in minimum days. And this is actually the work in progress. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very interesting and enlightening talk about the publication process
Thank you, Dr. Ranji.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request our chairpersons for this evening, Dr. Farzad Pakdal. He is the Vice Chair of Education Department and Ophthalmic Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery in Farabi Hospital, Tehran. Welcome, sir. And the other chairperson is Dr. Chandra Herat. She is the editor of our famous International Journal of Oral Health Dentistry, joining us all the way from Sri Lanka. So our international chairpersons, welcome. Kindly share your thoughts and comments on today's talk.
Yeah, thank you very much. Our moderator today, Dr. Hanas, and Dr. Rajiv Manhas. What a wonderful presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yeah, in a very clear manner, you discuss all the points, what are really important for editorial and review boards, what should we do, and the authors, because authors, they have done a wonderful job and they are waiting, but you just address that part as well. So I think definitely all the members who participated in this have learned most point because you presented in such a clear manner. It's wonderful and congratulations.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Manhas, for the great presentation. I agree with you, and I think the review process is very important. So it's like a beacon, actually. The editor's role and the whole editorial team act like a beacon. So you light a lamp in the darkness of the humanity, and the researchers actually are guided through that path. In the case that we have substandard or unsystematic review processing, maybe the path will be lost and the researchers will be lost. So if we can actually clear light that beacon, I think we can guide our especially young researchers through the correct way. Thank you very much for your comprehensive and instructive presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Farzad. Thank you so much.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajiv.
Thank you, ma'am.
And now I'm happy to introduce our second speaker for this evening. We have with us Dr. Akanksha Juneja. She's professor in the Department of Pediatric and Preventive Dentistry, Jamia Millia Islamia University in New Delhi. Madam did her BDS and MDS from Nair Hospital Dental College in Mumbai. And she has numerous publications and presentations to her credit. And many of her oral presentations have won international awards. She is affiliated with many national and international journals, and she's a very active reviewer. Currently, she is professor at the Department of Pediatric and Preventive Dentistry. Thank you so much for joining us, madam. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am, for introducing me. I am new to the society, and this is my first presentation for ISRF. Though I have been affiliated with Amina ma'am for a long time, I keep on hearing from her so many things, but I hope I am able to justify my topic, and all the people are able to happy with the presentation. So I'll just start. Just give me a moment. Okay, is it visible to everyone?
Yeah.
Yes, Akanksha.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
So I have been asked to talk about ethical obligations of an author. And I am Dr. Akanksha Juneja, as Hannah ma'am introduced me. coming from Faculty of Dentistry, Jamia Millia Islamia. This is my college. And just before I start, I'll just have 2 words. This presentation is purely from academic perspective, and I have tried from my side to give proper citations to all the references that I have used in my publication, in my presentation. So we'll just start with the topic. Ethical obligations of an author. Honestly speaking, ethics for me has always been a very boring topic when it comes to reading, especially in public health dentistry when I used to be in BDS. And when I was given this opportunity to talk about it, it was a very difficult task for me to actually go ahead with what all I can include and still make it an interesting presentation. Before I talk about ethics, I would like to talk about 2 other things, that is research and authorship. We talk about authors, but we make publications, so many manuscripts go, and there are multiple people who are involved in the publication itself, the entire process of concept, designing, data gathering, analysis.
Dr. Akanksha,
Yes, ma'am.
can you just make it slideshow, please? We're able to see the whole.
1 second, ma'am. I'll just do that. Is that fine?
Yes.
Okay.
Carry on. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. So as I was just talking that the research has multiple components, and so does authorship. When we denote an author for a publication, an author needs to fulfill multiple criteria. Like they have to be involved in the entire process of conception to analysis to writing to final approval, and then taking the responsibility that they are accountable for each and every aspect. That's how the research and the authorship comes together. And because these 2 are very important aspects, ethics come into practice when we consider that we have to do a study. Now, what exactly we would say by ethics is what is morally right, what is legitimate, what is right to do, and what is not right to do. And I would say that whenever we are going for a research, ethics is a very thin balance between 2 aspects. We are in a process of providing new scientific knowledge through our research process, and at the same time, we need to take into consideration what are the rights of the participants, what are the rights of our patients, and what we are giving to the society, and are we giving it in an absolutely right manner. So we can go anywhere. Is it right that should this be the only important aspect that we are doing a research? You can just say, I mean, there has been multiple studies. For instance, there was a study on drugs that are used for the treatment of syphilis. This is a US study in 1960s, 70s, where they started with the treatment, they started with a new drug, but at the same time, they realized that the drug is very useful. However, to the control participants, they did not give the they did not give the drug in spite of understanding that it is useful. And what happened was that later, in the course of time, all these patients went towards the tertiary syphilis, and the disease became that it became non-treatable. So yes, we have found a treatment, we have realized that it is good. So should it be ethical or unethical? There have been so many questions with that. And taking all these things into consideration, I have tried to divide these ethics part into 2 aspects. One, when we are planning and conducting a research, and second, when we are writing and publishing our manuscript. So I will start with the first aspect, that when we start with the planning and the conducting part, most important criteria is ethical approval. It is mandatory for all the journals now to have an ethical approval for whichever kind of research that you are doing. Most of the colleges, institutes have an institutional ethical committee, which gives clearance whenever you are doing a study on human subject, or you are doing on animal report, and what kind of data you are collecting. And along with the approval comes registration of the clinical trials. It has become mandatory by the Drug Licensing Authority of India in 2009 that we need to register all the clinical trials. Now, the second type of studies that we do come across in our practice is the observational studies. Are we, the first was registration. Are we really doing all the clinical trials are getting registered is one question that is a food for thought for all of us. But the second is, are we actually registering observational studies? So why should we not register is always a concern for us. And yes, ethically, should it be considered that we should register or not? Well, there are multiple advantages of registering. First and the foremost, that we are able to avoid the duplicacy that can happen when we are doing a particular kind of an observational study. Second, the identification of gaps in the research is understood because everything is there where we can observe what all studies have happened and what all are still in the process that we are not able to assess. Third, we say as we go ahead in my presentation, I'm going to talk about what are the rights or why do we take informed consent and what are the components of informed consent when we go ahead with a study. So when we are having human participants, it is equally important for them to know what are the results of the study. And because if we are going to have all the data, we can have a better evidence-based practices where the bias is going to be less. We can go ahead with the meta-analysis and systematic reviews where the data is available and we know that so many studies have been observed. As I said, first we spoke about ethical approval. Second is the registration of the clinical trials, and third aspect is the ethical issues which we come across when there is human participation, which starts that it has to be a voluntary participation. Complete informed consent has to be taken where the participant knows regarding the purpose of the study. We have to tell them that there is going to be an anonymity and confidentiality that we are going to take care if a participant is going to be a part of a particular research. And this again becomes an issue for ethics because when we are going to write a paper and publish it, a new concept has come where they are saying that you have to make your data available on the public domain. So then how are we going to deal with this anonymity and confidentiality component, which is an ethical issue when we are planning and conducting a study? But when it comes to that we are writing, we have to be ethical at that component. So as I said, that it's a very thin line and the balance can go on in any direction when we talk about ethics. The two other parts are that we have to take care that there is a minimal harm that is associated when we are talking about human or animal participation. And at the same time, the results, whatever results we get, the participant has the right to know what results of our study has been in which he has taken part. We came across multiple aspects which are in human participation, and then the concept of informed consent came into picture where we elaborate all these things and we take. But it actually started from, I think everybody must have heard about the Nuremberg Code, which came in there was a study during the World War II, and multiple drug trials were done by German doctors on their prisoners. And later it was realized that they were not allowed to leave the study in spite of the fact that they were having multiple adverse or side effects. Then there was a court trial of all these doctors where even though they had it in written that, okay, probably you can leave, there was no clear-cut indication and boundaries as to how they could leave the study. And that is how, further following that, World Medical Association came with the Declaration of Helsinki, which we have to take care when we are involving humans in any medical research. short of time, so probably we cannot discuss too much on it. I'll move ahead with the next component, as I said, about the informed consent that we take part. So few brief points that need to be a part of an informed consent. आपने किसी भी patient को, किसी भी participant को, whenever you're going to be, they're going to be a part of your study, you have to take care that they have entire knowledge of what is the purpose of the study, any kind of discomfort that is associated, if there is any side effect, how you're going to compensate for that, are there going to be any alternate treatment modalities that are available even if you are trying something, and of course our identification as a researcher and our location where the participant can come to us with any kind of questions is very important. Anonymity and confidentiality goes without hand, that it has to be maintained. Now, the second part of my presentation, I spoke that first it is about the planning and conducting research. Second is about report writing and publishing, where technically we become as real authors when we start writing, and it becomes a problematic thing, because I believe that we might be a very good researcher, but not necessarily a very good writer. So there is a constant burden where in our education system that we should publish, and an ethical part that what we should publish is right. And that is how the first pointer comes, whether there is a misconduct and fraud. So if we are fabricating a data in a false manner, the data is not available and still we are trying to create a data, or if we are plagiarizing a data, and all these kinds of practices which are not acceptable by scientific society, they come in misconduct and fraud. See, we might have an honest error where we do not understand something, or we might interpret a data differently, because that is how our understanding has been. But it should not be intentional where you're trying to create a data. For instance, I've given an example also. Saibal Burt, he has done had put up a study regarding the genetic basis of intelligence. And later he came to know that the twin study that he conducted, all the data was just fabricated. There was no reality to it. So something like that is a highly unethical practice on the part of an author, on the part of a researcher to be done. The second, I think this is the bottom line for any kind of a research and ethical component that has to be taken into consideration: plagiarism, where we are using other person's thoughts, results, words without giving them appropriate credit. And it's an absolute no. It's an absolute no. And it has to be taken into consideration whenever any research has to be published. It may involve use of a copyrighted software, pictures, questionnaires, scales, where when we do a survey or we do any kind of scales that have been created without due permission and proper credit, if it is not there in public domain, and if it states that it is copyrighted by an individual or an author or a company, the correct way of taking permission is a must. It may be from a journal, it may be from a company, it may be from an editor, it may be from an author. So how do we avoid it? Sometimes when we start writing, we feel we start reading about it. Okay, now it's the time. We have done a review of literature. There are so many things, and we feel, oh wow, this person has written so well, and that's how I think. So it's an easiest way. Why not just replicate it? Even if we want to take up something as verbatim, it should not be a very big paragraph or a very big line. Short sentences still can be used in direct quotations. That is a must whenever we are quoting in correct replication of someone else's work. If we are adding something, we can put that in brackets. If there is another quote of someone else in the same quote, we use single quotation mark. And if we are omitting something from that, it is, you can see the ellipsis that we use. And of course, proper referencing from the work has to be given. That person has to be cited well. Complete citation is a must, whether it is in the form of a footnote or in the form of an endnote, and in referencing also. Second thing that we can do is paraphrasing. You have all the information, read from 3 to 4, 5, 10 articles, compile it together, and then write it in your own words along with citation. So again and again, in plagiarism, citing correctly an author, citing correctly the work of someone else is very important. Just by moving 2-3 words here and there, using a synonym of us in some line doesn't make it paraphrasing. It is as good as a plagiarism. So it requires a lot of effort, and that is why the best part is just try to have all the information and write it yourself. So I'll just give examples of how we can write the footnotes and endnotes regarding if we are using a chapter of or from an edited collection, or if we are using an article from a journal. So complete citation is there from author to year, title, journal, and the pages. And this is if we are taking a book. In my my presentation also, I have tried to include every article that I have used, every author with a proper citation. If any place I have gone wrong, it is absolutely unintentional, because it is their hard work and I am just trying to put that thing. Now, the third part when we come to report writing is a partial publication or salami slicing. We do a lot of hard work, complete a study, and then we feel itna kaam kar liya, I might as well just make 2 publications out of it. Easy thing to do, because there are multiple objectives, just might as well divide. And no. In 2020, recently only, UGC has come up, because we are all almost academic field or researchers, or in future people who have joined us, they will do post-graduation, they must be doing post-graduation, or they'll be joining. They have come up with the concept of self-plagiarism, and salami slicing is a part of it, where you are using your own work and you are splitting it into 2 and publishing. Now, I've tried to take 2 examples in it. One, the group of authors, they thought of an idea for a study. They did a pilot study on the same, published it, and after 2 years, they presented and published an elaborate study, but with complete short communication regarding the previous study they had published. So proper referencing and citation was done for the old study. This is not a part of salami slicing or a partial publication, because they have given a due credit and they have explained the reason. Second is, we've done a study, now we are presenting a poster in a conference, and then we publish it. The poster might have smaller part, but complete elaborate study is published later. Is this a part of partial publication? No, because it's a presentation part. It is generally believed and accepted that poster publication in a conference cannot be considered as a part of plagiarism or a partial publication. However, if you have published a paper and after that you are going for a poster or a paper presentation, then yes, this is plagiarism, because your article is already copyrighted with a particular journal. Fourth part is the duplicate or the hidden or redundant publication, where there is a duplicacy of the same data. Very well, it has been presented by COPE, the Committee of Publication Ethics, that when substantially overlapping data or same data is published without adequate justification, without the knowledge of journal's editors, and the reviewer or the reader is unable to realize that the most of the data has been published before, then that is a redundant publication. The content is almost similar. Most of the articles will be similar with minimal modifications. Yes, there are a few instances where the editors might agree for a duplicate publication. For instance, we have done a study, and we want that study got published into a dental journal. Now, you also feel that this study is important from the medical perspective also, and we want to publish it in a medical journal. So we inform both the editors regarding the same, and if both the editors and the journals agree to this, then yes, this publication, this can be repeated along with a footnote saying that this is a previous publication that has already happened, or this is the primary article for that current publication or the second publication. This, as I said, that plagiarism, self-plagiarism, duplicacies, the government is becoming day by day very strict, and depending upon the level of plagiarism that you have, there are various legal legal problems that you can end up into, starting from retraction of paper to not allowed to publish for a particular years, up to suspension of your position in your university, and not being allowed to take even the PG students. It can go to a large extent. So plagiarism in any form should be avoided, and it is really an ethical concern for all the authors that such kind of practices should not be taken. Fifth aspect is the issue in authorship. Now, this does come in the legal aspect also, but I did take up from one point that I did come across, and that is a ghost authorship. I'm sure all of us who all are in the academic field, you must be getting mails from publishing houses or from people saying that we will write your article and you just become an author. You are not a part of a publication, you have not done a research, and you are put up as an author in that study. This is a ghost authorship and not right. Because if you're not accountable for that work, how can you be a part of that? Many a times in our work domain, I might want that because my head of the department is very senior to me, might as well put her or him as a primary author. We have all done it, honestly speaking. And then we realize that it's not the right thing. So these are all the issues of authorship that we come across. And as a result, it is important that we try not to do it. And such kind of problems can be avoided if at an individual level, we communicate with each other before going for a proper authorship, holding discussions, having documented proof from the beginning when we are starting with the study till the publication part. I'm just coming to an end of my presentation. Two more things. One is conflict of interest, and another, as I said, about the presentation of data part in public domain. So conflict of interest is a major problem again for us when there is a primary and a secondary interest is associated. 4 types of information that is always asked by the editors is that, one, if there is any commercial commercial liability with that. Second, any relationship with a commercial institute or a company that might be involved in this interest. Any non-financial benefits, or your family member, your spouse, or your children are associated with any such kind of an association. So this has to be declared so that later, because we do come across, there are so many companies who end up funding our studies, and then they might want that the result should go in the positive direction. Your data should indicate that the studies, the medicine is so useful, or the material that we are using in the industry should be very useful. And this is a conflict of interest. And to avoid it, there are multiple study designs that you can come across, crossover study designs, or blinding, or that can be done, so that we don't know and there will not be any bias. As a researcher, it is our responsibility to have minimal bias and should not get affected by the financial and the non-financial components of conflict. The last part, that sharing of research data for verification, it can have its advantages, but it can also have some disadvantages. Still a newer thing, and whether it is ethical or not is still questionable. Of course, the data is available in public domain and the results can be verified by anyone and everyone. It can be used in a broader context. It can be helpful in planning new trials, no doubt, but at the same time, there will be an issue with the consents that we have taken, or the disclosure part that we have. How are we going to maintain the anonymity and confidentiality is a tedious process, where you need to do the coding of each and every individual, so that even if it goes into public domain, we are at level best not to be able to show their identity or disclose their identity. And in itself, the fact that when you're putting a data, suppose it is in the negative aspect, जो हमने बनाया है, there is always a risk that you might distort the data so as to prevent or preserve your self-identity. I'll just summarize with all my points. Research is an important aspect. It has become very important for all of us to publish also, being in an academic community. But we need to always think about originality, plagiarism, acknowledgement of other people's work, and the rights and responsibilities that we share towards our subject participants. Then and only then we will be able to make a difference in the society. So I will just end with a quote, that even the most rational approach to ethics is defenseless if there isn't the will to do what is right. Thank you so much. These are my references, and thank you to IESRF community. Thank you to everyone, and I'm open to if any questions are there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akanksha Juneja. That was a thought-provoking and very interesting talk, and you presented the ethics of research and publication in such a clear and fascinating way. I request our chairperson, Dr. Farzad Patel, sir, who joins us from Tehran. Can you give your valuable comments, please?
Thank you very much, Dr. Chandra, for the great presentation. Yeah, actually, conflict of interest is really important when reviewing the article or judging for accepting or rejecting, or even when a reader is studying the paper, needs to know about the conflict of interest. So some quick points. Conflict of interest per se does not that the paper should be rejected or something. It just clarifies the judgment about that paper, or actually explicit acquisition of data, considering the conflict of interest. The other thing is that some journals ask for even the potential conflict of interest situation. So not only they ask for any payments or some employments, they may ask for, have you been there for like 3 years employed in that company, or received any grant from that pharmacist for the last 3 years or something, or your spouse or second degree relatives has actually been granted or traveled or something. So these are the potential conflict of interest situations that should be taken into account. And I would like to actually make a comment about the human rights. We should also consider we have animal rights as well, as Dr. Juneja beautifully mentioned about that. So animals should be treated as we have guidelines like ARVO, guidelines for treating the animals. We shouldn't harm unnecessarily the animals. We should find other substitutes if we can do something like microfluidics, is not necessary to sacrifice animals. So we should consider that animal studies also we should consider the actually ethical approval and ethical issues about that thing. And actually, I enjoyed a lot. I learned a lot from the actually presentation of Dr. Juneja, and we may talk more if we have time. Thank you.
Surely, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. I request our other chairperson, Dr. Chandra Herat. Madam is the editor of the International Journal of Oral Health Dentistry, joining us from Sri Lanka. Madam, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Akanksha Junior. Yeah, what again a wonderful presentation. You just touch all the aspects of ethical sides when we write or when we publish our research. So before planning and then while writing, and also decide, that means about plagiarism and duplicacy and all the things, authorship in detail. I think definitely all the points would be important for our listeners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there are a few questions in the chat box.
Yes, ma'am. There are one or two questions. If you would give me the permission, I'll just read them.
Yes, please.
What if we submit single article to multiple journals at the same time for publication? No, it's not acceptable. We cannot do that. And this is again unethical practice. Each article has to be submitted to one journal at a time. You must be seeing that they ask us to tick a box that this journal has been sent to only to this journal at particular. So you cannot send your article to multiple journals at one time. It is an unethical practice. Second, are any scrutiny action taken for plagiarism from the government after its introduction in 2018? Yes, very recently, if you would go to the papers in Delhi University, there was one professor who was considered that plagiarism practice. He was seen involved in a plagiarism practice, and in that case, the article was retracted, and at the same time, see, it depends. If it's a first case, then they do sometimes just retract the article and they might just give you a warning. And let me tell you, if the article is retracted, it doesn't mean it is not allowed. It is not available on the public domain. It is available, and at the same time, it is watermarked as a retracted article. So this in itself is not a something that you would want if by any chance you are caught in the act of plagiarism. If it is multiple times, then yes, there is an inquiry at the level of the university or the institute where an inquiry committee sits and decides, and accordingly the rules have been very clear. That's why I shared the gazette. If you go through that gazette, it is almost 5-6 pages. Depending upon the level of plagiarism, they decide what action should be taken.
Thank you for answering those questions.
There is one more question. Do we need patient consent for doing audit? For example, 5-year operations performed. See, if you're doing a retrospective study on the aspect that you did something, you have a data and that you are analyzing, you would realize that in your institute or in your practice, we do take sign from a patient which has 4-5 lines. Now, if you would read that clearly, when a patient comes, we tell them that this is an institute where teaching happens. This is how we are going to perform the treatment, and you are responsible for it. And your data will be used for further analysis. So this is a part that will be there. So when you go retrospectively, also actually you have taken the consent. So consent in any form is a must, whether it is a prospective or retrospective.
Dr. Akanksha, there are a couple of questions in the question and answer box also.
For Dr. Rajiv sir also there are some
Yeah,
questions.
yes. Acha, one question, Akanksha, there's one interesting question. Now, how the authorship will be decided when the data is shared between two departments? Like suppose two people from different specialty, they're sharing the data. So how the authorship should be decided in that case?
Ma'am, technically speaking, again, that's why I said that every author has to be a part of the entire process. And then it has to be mutually decided depending upon the individual needs, requirements, and systematically deciding for it. Before you plan a study, it's very important at that point only. Because if you try to do a study and then there will always be a conflict. So this has to be done at an individual level, and if by any chance it is not done, then it is the editorial intervention that is the last resort that is taken into consideration.
Request Dr. Jha to give his input regarding this. And there's a lot of conflict happening when 2 or 3 people, they combine and do a study, and when the time of publishing come, then there's a conflict of who is going to be the primary author, who's going to be the secondary. Then there's we need your guidance in that issue.
Yes, you have rightly pointed out this very important question. And I think, as Dr. Juneja has rightly put in, that it is at the time of planning this study that which study is going to be the primary one. So the first author will be the from whose data the primary data have been taken. And when there are more than one authors, only the priority has to be set in. Who will be the first, who is going to be the second. Unless you are concealing the data from the second person or the third person and you are not disclosing it. So once all the authors are disclosed, I think the priority matters. Dr. Juneja, you feel different?
No, sir, I agree with you. Rather,
Perfectly.
I also believe and I mentioned it also in my presentation, that you can do this in as you make a documentation from the beginning. If it is done that this person is going to be a primary author, then this problem of conflict or issues in authorship can be avoided.
Right.
Perfect, sir. I agree, sir.
Can I make a quick comment on this?
Yes, yes, sir. Most welcome, sir.
Yeah, I totally agree that it's like a company. We should clarify the role of everybody and the share and the position of everybody from the beginning of the study, not just at the end or after publication. So it brings lots of trouble. So another thing that may clarify and may be actually balanced or it's useful to judging is the contribution role of every of the researchers and the contributors for the manuscript, the role design like data gathering or analysis, critical appraisal of the article, drafting the article, or some significant inputs, not just some gathering of some data. So I think contribution may be helpful for some studies when we have lots of actually researchers there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your valuable input.
Well,
Dr. Raji.
Dr. Juneja, I would just like to say that I'm very much enthused. You have inherent capability of making things look so simple. And I must admit that on ethical issues, I have heard your presentation and felt that this was one presentation, but for few facts which Dr. Farjad additionally mentioned, that you could put very many contradictions together in this difficult subject. I must congratulate you.
Thank you, sir. Your words mean a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I now request Nikita ji to kindly do the digital plaque presentation for Dr. Akanksha.
Thank you so much.
So thank you all so much for joining us, and hope that we'll see all the participants again tomorrow evening for the last day of this fascinating workshop for authors. I especially take this opportunity to thank Dr. S.S. Jha and IESRF for organizing this wonderful workshop and a series of workshops. Thank you for joining us, sir. And thank Nikita, madam. Thank you so much for all your help and assistance and for organizing this program. I thank our wonderful speakers for today, Dr. Rajiv Manhas and Dr. Akanksha Juneja. It was a wonderful evening, very excellent presentations. I enjoyed all of the slides and the talks immensely. Big thank you to our chairpersons, Dr. Farzad Patel from Iran and Dr. Chandra Herat for joining us from Sri Lanka. Thank you so much.